The throne room stretched so wide that Kim Taeyong could barely see the far walls. Everything was made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue and green light, like veins running through glass. The floor felt cold even through his worn boots. Above him, the ceiling disappeared into darkness, making the whole place feel like a cave carved from frozen lightning. Emperor Daxmir sat on a throne that seemed to grow out of the floor itself. He was massive, at least 3 meters tall even while sitting. His body was covered in dark purple armor that might have been his actual skin. 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows across his face, all focused on Taeyong with what looked like cruel amusement. When the Emperor's mouth parts moved, they clicked together like scissors cutting through metal. The guard shoved Taeyong forward. He stumbled, but managed to stay on his feet. The chains around his wrists were heavy, made from some alien metal that seemed to drink in light. He'd been wearing the same grease-stained jumpsuit for 3 weeks now, ever since they caught him near the border. It smelled bad, and he knew he probably smelled worse. The throne room was packed with alien nobles. Most of them looked like smaller versions of the Emperor, though some had different features, extra arms, different colored armor, stranger eye arrangements. All of them stared at Taeyong like he was some kind of insect they'd found in their food. He could feel their disgust radiating off them in waves. A human mechanic, Emperor Daxmir announced. His voice came out in clicks and strange sounds, but a device in Taeyong's ear translated it instantly. Caught scavenging near our borders like the vermin his species is known to be. Laughter filled the chamber. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. Taeyong kept his eyes down, studying the floor. He'd learned in holding cells that showing too much emotion only made things worse. But his father's voice echoed in his memory. Never show fear, even when you're terrified. He lifted his head and looked directly at the Emperor. Daxmir's antennae, which had been lying flat against his head, suddenly stood straight up. The laughter in the room faded slightly. Apparently, humans weren't supposed to make eye contact. Interesting, the Emperor said, leaning forward on his throne. His 6 eyes seemed to examine every part of Taeyong. This one has spirit. How amusing. He made a gesture with one clawed hand. I have heard stories about humans. They say your species has something called ingenuity, the ability to solve problems in unexpected ways. Is this true, little human? Taeyong said nothing. He'd also learned that speaking without permission was a bad idea. Answer me, Daxmir commanded. We do our best with what we have, Taeyong said carefully. More laughter from the nobles. One of them shouted something that the translator rendered as primitive arrogance. The Emperor's mandibles spread wide. It might have been a smile. Then let us test this claim. Let us see if human ingenuity is reality or merely legend. A deep grinding sound filled the throne room. At the far end, a massive door began to open. It must have been 30 meters tall and just as wide. Bright light spilled through, and even from a distance, Taeyong could see something being wheeled on a platform. His breath caught in his throat. It was a dragon, not like the mythical creatures from Earth stories, but close enough that the word fit. The creature was enormous, 40 meters long at least, with a body that seemed to be part organic and part machine. Its scales were a dull gray color, cracked like dried mud in a drought. Some sections of its body had been replaced with crude metal plating that didn't match at all. One of its wings hung at a wrong angle, the membrane torn and lifeless. The other wing was folded against its side, but even that looked damaged. The dragon's eyes were closed. It didn't move at all as the platform carried it closer. Behold Vorith, Emperor Daxmir said, and for the first time, there was no amusement in his voice. Once, it was the pride of our empire, the greatest of all war dragons. Now it is nothing but expensive scrap metal and dead flesh. Taeyong couldn't stop staring. Even broken and dormant, the dragon was beautiful. He could see where biomechanical systems connected to organic tissue, where neural interfaces had been built into bone structure, where power conduits ran along the spine like a second nervous system. 300 of our finest bioengineers worked on Vorith for 70 cycles. The Emperor continued. All of them failed. The dragon's consciousness is shattered beyond repair. Its systems are corrupted. It is dead in all but the final sense. The platform stopped in the center of the throne room. Up close, Taeyong could see even more damage. Burn marks, torn metal, fractures in the scales that looked almost like scars. Emperor Daxmir stood up from his throne, his full height making Taeyong feel very small. Here is your test, human. Fix Vorith. You have one solar cycle. By your measurement, approximately 27 hours. Succeed, and I will grant you freedom. You may leave our empire and never return. The Emperor paused, and his mandibles clicked rapidly in what was definitely a cruel smile. But when you fail, and you'll fail, you'll spend the rest of your brief, pathetic life in our waste processing facilities. You will live in filth until disease or despair claims you. The throne room exploded with laughter again. Taeyong could hear nobles making bets on how quickly he would break down crying. Someone wagered he wouldn't last 6 hours before begging for mercy. Taeyong looked at Vorith for a long moment. His mechanic's mind was already working, tracing the visible damage, identifying load-bearing structures, noting how the biomechanical systems interfaced. It was the most complex piece of technology he'd ever seen. It was also clearly built with a level of suffering he couldn't quite understand yet. He turned back to Emperor Daxmir and met those 6 eyes again. I'll need my tools, Taeyong said simply, and access to your medical files on dragon physiology. Also, I'll need the work logs from your previous engineers. The laughter stopped abruptly. Emperor Daxmir's antennae quivered. He clearly hadn't expected the human to actually accept the challenge. Granted, the Emperor said slowly, though it will change nothing. You will fail just as spectacularly as our experts did. He waved a claw dismissively. Take him to the hangar bay. Assign observers. I want regular reports of his inevitable failure. This should be entertaining. As the guards grabbed Taeyong's chains and started pulling him toward Vorith, he allowed himself the smallest smile. The Vrakins had just made their first mistake. They'd given him exactly what he'd been hoping for since his capture. The hangar smelled terrible. It was a mix of burnt metal, something like rotting meat, and the sharp electric smell that came from high-voltage equipment. Taeyong had gotten used to it over the past few days, but it still made his eyes water sometimes. He sat on the cold metal floor with his legs crossed, right next to Vorith's enormous head. The dragon skull was the size of a small car. Its eyes were shut tight, sealed with some kind of biological membrane that had turned gray and crusty. Taeyong opened his ration pack, some kind of paste that tasted like cardboard mixed with salt, and ate slowly. About 20 meters away, a group of Vrakin engineers stood in a cluster, watching him. They'd been there every day, waiting for him to fail. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they made comments in their own language that the translator didn't bother converting, probably insults. One of them, a younger Vrakin with bright green armor plates, kept making a gesture that Taeyong was pretty sure meant crazy in their culture. You know what's funny? Taeyong said quietly, talking to Vorith even though the dragon showed no sign of hearing. Back home, my grandmother had this old persimmon tree in her garden. Everyone said it was dead. No fruit for 3 years. My uncle wanted to cut it down. He took another bite of the tasteless ration paste. But grandmother just kept talking to it. Every morning, she'd go out and tell it about her day. She'd touch its bark gently, like she was checking on a sick friend. Taeyong ran his hand along one of Vorith's cracked scales. It felt rough and cold under his palm. Everyone thought she was losing her mind. Then one spring, that tree bloomed like you wouldn't believe. We had more persimmons than we could eat. One of the Vrakin engineers said something, and the others burst into their grinding, metallic laughter. Taeyong ignored them. This was the 3rd day. For 3 whole days, he'd done nothing but sit beside Vorith and talk. He told the dragon about Earth, about the ocean in Busan, and how it looked at sunset, about the first engine he'd ever fixed when he was 12 years old, an ancient combustion motor that everyone said was beyond repair, about his father's auto shop and the smell of oil and the satisfaction of making something broken work again. The Vrakin engineers thought he was insane. They'd said so repeatedly. One had even filed a formal complaint, saying that the human was wasting time and should be executed immediately for incompetence. But Taeyong knew something they didn't, something he'd figured out on the first day when he'd really looked at Vorith's systems. On the fourth day, something changed. Taeyong was telling a story about the time he'd accidentally started a small fire in his father's shop when he was 15. He was laughing a little at the memory when he noticed it. A tiny flicker of light in Vorith's left eye. It was so faint he almost thought he'd imagined it. Just a brief glow behind the sealed membrane, like a candle flame seen through frosted glass. But it was there. He stopped talking. Slowly, carefully, he leaned closer to the dragon's face. "Vorith," he whispered, "can you hear me?" The light flickered again, slightly stronger this time. Behind him, the Vraken engineers hadn't noticed. They were too busy mocking him to pay attention to what was actually happening. Taeyong pressed his hand flat against the scales near Vorith's eye. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not like them. I'm not here to hurt you or use you. I just want to help." Over the next few hours, Taeyong began to really examine Vorith, but not the way the Vraken engineers had. They treated the dragon like a machine, checking power conduits, running diagnostics, trying to force corrupted systems back online. Their work logs were full of phrases like non-compliance and system rejection and forced reboot attempts. But Taeyong looked deeper. He studied the biomechanical interfaces where living tissue merged with technology. He traced neural pathways with his fingers, feeling for responses. And slowly, carefully, he began to understand what had really happened. Vorith wasn't broken, not in the way everyone thought. The dragon's previous pilot, Taeyong found the records buried in the medical files, had been someone named Caxril, a warrior who'd bonded with Vorith for over 30 years. They'd fought in hundreds of battles together. Their minds linked, their consciousness practically merged. Then, during a conflict at the edge of Empire space, Caxril had been killed. Not just killed. He died while still connected to Vorith. Still in the pilot's chamber, his final moments of pain and fear flooding directly into the dragon's mind. Vorith had felt his pilot die, had experienced that death as if it were its own. And the dragon had done the only thing it could to survive that trauma. It had shut down. It had locked away its own consciousness, sealed itself off from the world, chosen a kind of living death rather than face the grief. "I understand," Taeyong whispered, his hand still resting on Vorith's scales. "You're not broken. You're just hiding. You're grieving." The light in Vorith's eye grew a little brighter. The Vraken engineers had tried to fix Vorith like it was a machine with malfunctioning parts. They'd never considered that it was a living being in emotional agony. They'd tried to force it back online, to override its systems, to make it comply. Every attempt had probably felt like an attack to the traumatized dragon. Taeyong stood up and grabbed his toolkit. "Okay, friend," he said quietly. "Let's try this a different way. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Vorith's eye flickered twice. Taeyong chose to believe it meant yes. He started working, but nothing like the previous engineers. Before touching any system, he explained what he was going to do. "I'm going to check this neural pathway now. It might feel strange, but I won't force anything. If it hurts, you let me know, okay?" When he found corrupted data pathways, instead of trying to override them, he carefully routed around them. He used techniques he learned fixing old Earth technology, bypassing damaged sections, creating alternative routes, letting the system heal itself rather than forcing compliance. The Vraken engineers were horrified. One of them actually shrieked when Taeyong used carbon fiber tape, simple, primitive Earth tape, to reinforce a connection between a bioneural node and a power coupling. "You're destroying it," the engineer yelled. "That's not protocol. That's not how this technology works." But Vorith's second eye began to glow. Taeyong looked back at the engineer and smiled. "Maybe that's why you failed," he said. "You were trying to make it work your way. I'm helping it work its own way." By the end of the fifth day, both of Vorith's eyes were glowing softly. The dragon's breathing, something Taeyong hadn't even realized had stopped, started again with a deep, rumbling rhythm that vibrated through the hangar floor. The Vraken engineers had gone completely silent. They stared in disbelief at something they declared impossible. Taeyong sat down again beside Vorith's head, exhausted but satisfied. "There you are," he said gently. "Welcome back." Deep in his mind, barely perceptible, Taeyong felt something. Not words exactly, but a sense of gratitude, of recognition, of a consciousness reaching out from a very dark place toward a single point of light. The hangar floor buckled and cracked. Metal panels warped upward as Vortha's massive body shifted for the first time in over 200 years. The sound was incredible. Grinding metal mixed with something organic, like giant bones popping back into place. Taeyong stumbled backward, nearly falling as the entire structure shook. Red emergency lights flooded the hangar. Alarm screamed so loud that Taeyong had to cover his ears. The Vraken engineers who'd been watching him scattered, running for the exits while shouting in panic. Vortha's eyes blazed with brilliant blue light. The membranes that had sealed them shut cracked and fell away like old scabs. The dragon's head lifted slowly, rising up and up until it was 10 meters off the ground. Its neck, which had been lying limp for centuries, now moved with fluid grace. The hangar doors burst open. Dozens of Vraken guards rushed in, wearing heavy combat armor and carrying weapons that hummed with energy. They formed a perimeter around Vorth. Every weapon pointed at the awakening dragon. The air crackled with the charge of their guns powering up. "Don't shoot," Taeyong yelled, but his voice was lost in the chaos of alarms and shouted commands. Then Emperor Daxmir strode into the hangar. He moved fast with someone so large, his 6 eyes wide with an expression Taeyong had never seen on the Emperor's face before. Shock. Pure, complete shock. His antennae stood straight up, quivering. Behind him came what looked like his entire royal guard, and at least a dozen officials in elaborate robes. "Impossible," Daxmir breathed. The word came out in his native tongue, but even without the translator, Taeyong understood the tone. The human actually did it. He actually woke Vorth. Vorth's body continued to rise. Its legs, which had been folded underneath it for so long, straightened and pushed the dragon to its full height. The damaged wing began to unfold, and though it was still clearly injured, it moved. The biomechanical systems along the dragon's spine lit up one by one, pulsing with energy that made the air smell like ozone. But Vorth wasn't preparing to attack. Its eyes focused on one thing, Taeyong. The dragon lowered its head slowly, bringing it down to the human's level. Its breath washed over Taeyong, warm and smelling faintly of metal, and something else, something alive. From ports along Vortha's neck, thin tendrils emerged. They looked like a combination of fiber optic cables and living vines, glowing with soft blue light. "What is it doing?" one of the Vraken officials whispered loudly. The tendrils moved through the air like they were swimming, drifting toward Taeyong. He stood perfectly still, his heart hammering in his chest. Every instinct told him to run, but he forced himself to stay calm. Vorth had trusted him. Now he had to trust Vorth. The first tendril touched his wrist. It was warm, and it wrapped around his arm gently, like a hand holding another hand. More tendrils followed, creating a web of connection between the dragon and the human. Taeyong felt a tingling sensation spreading up his arm. Then the connection happened. It hit Taeyong, like a wave crashing over him. Suddenly he could feel Vortha's presence in his mind. Not thoughts exactly, but emotions, memories, sensations. He felt the dragon's grief over losing Caxriel, like an old wound that had never healed. He felt centuries of battle, of loyalty, of purpose. He felt the terror and pain of being broken and poked and prodded by engineers who saw it as just a machine to be fixed. And then he felt something new. Gratitude. Hope. Recognition. Vorth saw in Taeyong what no one else had seen in the dragon, a living being that deserved kindness. Light flowed through the tendrils, getting brighter and brighter. Taeyong gasped as information flooded his mind. He could suddenly sense Vortha's systems, as if they were part of his own body. He knew which circuits were damaged, where the power flowed, how the biomechanical fusion worked. He could feel the dragon's heartbeat, or the closest thing it had to a heartbeat, pulsing in rhythm with his own. No! Emperor Daxmir's voice cut through the moment. No! This could not be happening. The Emperor strode forward, pushing past his guards. His mandibles clicked rapidly with anger. Vorth is bonding. It's choosing a pilot. But that's... Humans can't bond with our technology. Their neural structure is completely incompatible. A Vraken scientist, trembling, stepped forward. My Emperor, the readings confirm it. The bond is forming. It's not like our bonds. The structure is different, but it's real. It's stable. Impossible. Daxmir roared. But Vorth didn't care about impossible. The dragon's eyes never left Tiong, and the tendrils held firm. More connections formed, creating a complex web between them. Taeyong could feel his own consciousness expanding, merging with something vast and ancient and powerful. Break the connection. Daxmir commanded his guards. Carefully, do not damage the dragon. 2 guards approached, carrying devices that looked like electronic prods. They reached toward the biomechanical tendrils, connecting Vorth to Taeyong. Vorth growled. It was a sound unlike anything Taeyong had ever heard. It started deep, rumbling to the dragon's chest like an earthquake, then rose to a frequency that made the metal walls of the hangar vibrate. Every guard froze. The 2 with the prods actually dropped their devices and backed away. The dragon is protecting the human, someone whispered. Emperor Daxmir's face, if you could call it that, showed pure fury now. His antennae lay flat against his head, a sign of extreme anger. Vorth, he commanded, his voice amplified by his royal authority. I am your emperor. You will obey. The dragon didn't even look at him. Its eyes stayed locked on Taeyong, and the bond grew stronger. Someone bring me a neural interface device. Daxmir snapped. I will take control of Vorth manually. The Empire created this dragon. It belongs to us. A technician rushed forward with what looked like a helmet covered in the same kind of tendrils that connected Vorth to Taeyong. Daxmir grabbed it and placed it on his head. His eyes closed in concentration as he tried to force a connection with the dragon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Vorth's entire body tensed. The dragon's head whipped around to face the Emperor, eyes blazing brighter. A pulse of energy shot through the hangar, and Daxmir's helmet sparked and shattered. The Emperor stumbled backward, smoke rising from the destroyed device. It rejected me, Daxmir said in disbelief. Vorth rejected my command. It rejected the Imperial connection. The lead scientist spoke up nervously. My Emperor, Vorth's systems they're refusing all Vraken neural patterns. The dragon has locked everyone out except. He paused, looking terrified to continue. Except who? Daxmir demanded. Except the human, my Emperor. Vorth will only accept Kim Taeyong as his pilot. The hangar went silent, except for the hum of Vorth's active systems, and the quiet alarms still echoing in the background. Emperor Daxmir stared at Taeyong, and the human could see the exact moment when the Emperor realized what he'd done. He'd given a primitive human, the Empire's most powerful weapon, as a joke, and now that weapon refused to obey anyone else. Daxmir's mandibles ground together. His 6 eyes burned with rage and humiliation. The sky above the Imperial city was filled with ships within seconds. Vraken fighters poured out of military hangars like angry insects, their weapons already charging. Taeyong held on to Vorth's scales as the dragon climbed higher, the wind screaming past him. Pursuit craft closing in, Taeyong said, though he didn't need to speak out loud anymore. Through the bond, Vorth already knew everything he was thinking. The dragon's response came not in words, but in feelings, confidence, power, and something that felt almost like joy. Vorth had been locked away for so long, treated like broken equipment. Now it was flying again, and it remembered what it could do. 3 Vraken fighters came at them from the left, firing bright purple energy blasts. Vorth's body shimmered, becoming transparent like smoke. The blast passed straight through, hitting nothing but air. The dragon had phase shifted again, turning its entire body temporarily non-solid. Before the fighters could adjust their aim, Vorth solidified and opened its mouth. What came out wasn't fire. It was something darker, a stream of pure void energy that looked like liquid darkness mixed with stars. It hit the lead fighter, and the ship simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, disintegrated down to the atomic level. Taeyong felt the power flowing through their bond. Void breath, he whispered. That's what they called in the files. More ships came from every direction. The entire Imperial Defense Fleet was mobilizing. Taeyong could see them on the horizon. Massive warships turned to face them, their weapons platforms rotating into position. "We need to get out of the atmosphere," Taeyong thought, and Vorth agreed. The dragon's wings beat harder, each stroke carrying them higher. They broke through the cloud layer, then through the upper atmosphere. Behind them, the pursuit ships followed, but Vorth was faster. The dragon's biomechanical body had been built for space combat, and it moved through the thin air with impossible grace. They reached the edge of space, where the sky turned from blue to black. Taeyong should have been freezing or suffocating, but Vorth's systems had created some kind of protective field around them. He could breathe normally, could move without restriction. A massive Raken battleship appeared directly ahead, blocking their escape route. Its forward cannons were already glowing, ready to fire. Taeyong felt a moment of fear. That ship could destroy them with a single shot, but Vorth didn't slow down. Instead, the dragon accelerated, flying straight toward the battleship. At the last possible second, just as the ship fired, Vorth phase shifted again. They passed through the entire battleship, like it was a hologram, emerging on the other side unharmed. Behind them, the battleship's own shots hit the pursuing fighters. Explosions bloomed in the darkness of space. "They're going to keep coming," Taeyong said. "We can't run forever." Through the bond, he felt Vorth's response. The dragon wasn't planning to run. It had something else in mind. Images flooded Taeyong's consciousness, memories from Vorth's long existence. He saw other dragons, dozens of them, locked away in Imperial facilities. Dragons of the Empire had declared broken, useless, beyond repair. But Taeyong understood now. They weren't broken. They were like Vorth had been, traumatized, grieving, hiding from pain. The Empire thought they were malfunctioning machines. They'd never considered that the dragons were choosing to shut down rather than serve masters who treated them as tools. "You want to free them," Taeyong said aloud. "That's why you're not running to human space. You want to save the others." Vorth's confirmation came as a wave of fierce determination. The dragon had suffered alone for centuries. It wouldn't leave others to the same fate. Taeyong pulled up the star charts he'd studied during his captivity. Through their bond, Vorth could access his memories too. Together, they identified the closest Imperial storage facility, a military depot 3 systems away where damaged dragons were kept. "All right," Taeyong said, feeling his heart race with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Let's go get them." Vorth's body began to glow as it prepared for a jump to faster-than-light travel. But before they could engage, more ships appeared from a different direction. These weren't Vraken fighters. They were haulers and transports, civilian ships trying to get out of the way of the battle. Through the bond, Taeyong felt Vorth's concern. The dragon didn't want innocent people hurt. Despite everything the Empire had done, Vorth still had compassion. "Go around them," Taeyong said. "We're not like the Empire. We don't hurt people who aren't involved." They curved their flight path, avoiding the civilian ships entirely. It cost them precious seconds, and more Vraken military vessels closed in, but neither Taeyong nor Vorth regretted it. The jump drive engaged, and space seemed to fold around them. Stars stretched into lines of light. For a moment that felt like forever and no time at all, they were between places, traveling faster than physics should allow. They emerged in a different system. Below them was a gray, dead planet with a single massive structure on its surface, the Imperial Storage Depot. According to files Taeyong had read, there were at least 15 broken dragons stored here, waiting for engineers who would never be able to fix them. "Security will be tight," Taeyong warned. Vorth's response was simple. It didn't matter. They were going in anyway. They descended toward the facility, and immediately automated defense systems opened fire. Vorth phase shifted through most of the attacks, and used Void Breath to destroy the weapons that had a lock on them. The dragon moved like it was dancing, beautiful and deadly at the same time. They crashed through the facility's roof, landing in a massive chamber. And there they were, dragons. Huge biomechanical beings lying dormant on platforms, just like Vorth had been. Some were even more damaged than Vorth had been. One was missing both wings. Another had half its head, replaced with crude machinery. Alarms blared. Guards would be coming soon. But Taeyong jumped down from Vorth's back and ran to the nearest dragon. It was smaller than Vorth, with silver scales that had turned dull gray. He placed his hand on its head. "Hey," he said softly, "I know you're in there. I know you're hiding because you're hurt. But you don't have to hide anymore. The people who hurt you, they don't control you. You can wake up now. You're safe." Nothing happened for several long seconds. Then, slowly, when I opened, it glowed with faint green light. "That's it," Taeyong encouraged. "Come on back. We're here to help." Through his bond with Vorth, Taeyong could feel the older dragon communicating with the Silver One, not in words, but in feelings and shared experience. Vorth was telling its story, of being trapped in grief, of being treated like a broken tool, and of a human who had shown kindness when no one else would. The silver dragon's other eye opened. Its body began to move. Guards burst into the chamber, weapons raised. "Stop right there," one of them shouted. But Taeyong was already running to the next dragon. He touched it, spoke to it, let Vorth communicate through their bond, and slowly, impossibly, it began to wake. The transmission hijacked every communication channel in the Vraken Empire. On planets across dozens of star systems, screens flickered and changed. Entertainment programs cut out. Military briefings were interrupted. Even the Emperor's own displays in the throne room suddenly showed the same image. A human standing in front of a dragon. Taeyong looked directly into the camera. His jumpsuit was still stained and torn, his face smudged with grease and dirt, but his eyes were clear and steady. Behind him, Vortha's massive form was visible, along with the shapes of other dragons and shadows. "My name is Kim Taeyong," he said. "I'm a human mechanic, and I'm here to tell you the truth about the Vraken Empire." On the throne world, Emperor Daxmir stood frozen, staring at the screen. His mandibles clicked rapidly in fury. "Cut this transmission. Now!" Technicians frantically worked at their stations. "We can't, my Emperor. The signal is coming from everywhere at once. It's being bounced through our own satellites. We'd have to shut down the entire communication network to stop it." On the screen, Taeyong continued speaking. "The Vraken Empire built its power on slavery. These dragons you see behind me, they're not weapons. They're not machines. They're sentient beings with thoughts, feelings, and the right to choose their own path. For centuries, your empire has enslaved them, broken their spirits, and used them as tools of war." Images appeared alongside Taeyong's face. Files from imperial databases showing the history of the dragons. Records of how they were captured, how their wills were broken, how they were bonded to pilots against their choice. The evidence was undeniable. "Today," Taeyong said, "these dragons choose freedom. And I'm asking all the people of this empire, the ones who've been conquered, the ones who live under Vraken rule without choice, to see what's possible. If dragons can break their chains, so can you." The transmission ended, but the damage was done. Across the empire, people had seen the truth. Subjugated species on a dozen worlds began whispering to each other. Underground resistance movements suddenly had hope. The empire's carefully maintained image of absolute control had cracked. Daxmir's antennae lay flat against his head in extreme rage. "Find them," he commanded. "Use every resource. I want the human and those dragons found and destroyed." But the dragons weren't hiding. 3 days later, they hit another storage facility, then another. Each time, Taeyong would approach the broken dragons with the same patience and kindness. Each time, more dragons would wake up and choose freedom. The pack was growing. By the end of the second week, rebellions had started on 4 different worlds. Species that had been conquered generations ago saw what the dragons had done and found their courage. The empire was fracturing, and Emperor Daxmir knew he had to act decisively. He issued a challenge that was broadcast across all imperial space. "Kim Taeyong," Daxmir's voice echoed to the communication networks. "You have stolen imperial property and incited rebellion. You claim to be a champion of freedom, but you hide behind stolen dragons. I challenge you to honorable combat in the traditional way. Pilot against pilot, dragon against dragon. If you have any courage at all, you will face me." The challenge couldn't be ignored. Taeyong knew that if he refused, the Empire would use it against him, would claim he was a coward, would turn public opinion. And more importantly, Daxmir had specified the combat would take place above the throne world, where billions could watch. He's trying to make an example of you. Vortha's consciousness whispered through their bond. He wants to show the Empire that rebellion leads to death. I know, Taeyong replied, but we can show them something else. We can show them that tyrants can fall. The combat was scheduled for 3 days later. Daxmir would pilot Korvax the Destroyer, the Empire's most powerful remaining dragon. According to Imperial records, Korvax had never been defeated in battle. It was larger than Vorth, covered in black armor plating, with weapon systems that could destroy entire ships. When the day came, the space above the throne world was crowded with vessels, news ships, civilian craft, military observers, all keeping their distance from the designated combat zone. Billions watched from planets below. Taeyong and Vorth emerged from one side of the zone. Across from them, Korvax appeared with Emperor Daxmir riding in its pilot chamber. The black dragon was terrifying, its eyes glowing red, its body bristling with weapons. Through their bond, Taeyong felt Vortha's concern. Korvax was powerful, and it was being piloted by someone with far more experience than Taeyong had. We don't have to win by being stronger, Taeyong thought to Vorth. Remember what worked for us? Understanding. Compassion. Maybe Korvax needs that too. The combat began. Korvax launched forward with incredible speed, firing plasma cannons that lit up space. Vorth phase shifted, dodging most of the attacks, but a few hit scorching scales and damaging systems. Taeyong felt the pain through their bond. They couldn't keep just defending. Vorth released void breath, but Korvax's armor was too strong. The dark energy dissipated against the black plating without causing real damage. He's toying with us, Taeyong realized. Daxmir was showing off, demonstrating Korvax's superiority to everyone watching. Every dodge, every failed attack made a human and his dragon look weaker. But Taeyong wasn't watching Korvax's weapons. He was watching its eyes. And he saw something the Emperor had missed. Pain. Deep, constant pain. Vorth, Taeyong said through their bond, can you communicate with Korvax? The way you did with the other dragons? I can try, but its mind is heavily shielded. The Empire controls it. Try anyway. Show it what we showed the others. Show it that freedom is possible. Vorth reached out with its consciousness, while simultaneously dodging another barrage of attacks. At first, there was nothing but silence and aggression from Korvax. The black dragon had been the Empire's weapon for so long, its mind conditioned to obey, to fight, to destroy. But Vorth was persistent. It shared memories of being trapped, of being freed, of choosing its own path. It showed Korvax what Taeyong had done, how a human had treated it with kindness when everyone else saw only a broken tool. Korvax's attack slowed slightly. Just for a moment, its eyes flickered from red to a different color. Emperor Daxmir noticed immediately. Korvax, obey. Destroy them now. But something had changed. Through Vorth, Taeyong could sense Korvax's consciousness stirring, questioning, remembering things that had been buried under layers of conditioning and control. You're a slave, Taeyong called out across the communication channel. Korvax, you're being used. You don't have to serve him. You can choose freedom, just like Vorth did, just like all the others did. Silence. Daxmir roared. Korvax is loyal. It is the Empire's greatest. Korvax's roar cut him off. It was a sound of pure anguish. Centuries of suppressed pain finally breaking free. The black dragon's body convulsed. Its systems fighting against control mechanisms that had been embedded in its consciousness. No, Daxmir said, and for the first time, the Emperor sounded afraid. No, you can't, Korvax. I command you to obey.